Hi, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Talkin' Fire. My name is Dean Babineau, your host. We are here with District Chief Chris Kidder from the South Walton Fire District. Chief, how are you?
I'm doing great, Dean. How are you doing, man?
Fantastic. So far, so good, I guess, today.
Yes, sir.
And it's a little dark here. We're starting to lose the daylight. I think you're probably still got some sunshine where you are. Coming to us from the Panhandle. Is that a safe way to say that?
Yes, sir. The best place in the world, right? Panhandle of Florida. And we do have a little daylight, not for long, though. It's just slowly dwindling down.
Yeah, that was here. It was daylight when I kind of sat down here, but so far it's going away.
Yes,
So
sir.
you and I kind of connected after I read an article you wrote this May, but we're going to get to that in a few minutes, which led me down kind of a wormhole about you and some of the things that you believe and some of the things that you've written about. And they're intriguing to me, and that's why I reached out, and that's why we're here. And I think that the people that watch this podcast, firefighters, fire officers, aspiring fire officers, chief level officers, I think they'll be interested in the things you have to say. Why don't you tell us kind of how you got where you are? Like, how did you end up? How does Chris Kidder end up in the fire service? How about that?
That's a great story. Before I get into that, I'd just like to say thanks for reaching out. It's an honor to be asked to come on and just talk the job. You know, something I'm very passionate about. So just to have the opportunity to come out here and just talk for a little bit and then just kind of spread the word, and hopefully somebody will listen and grab something out of this conversation. So that's what it's all about. So for me, I was working in a little town called City of Niceville, which is here in the Florida Panhandle. Was married at the time with 3 kids, very young age, and was just kind of working for the city in general. And they were running kind of like a combination style fire department. So I was working around a lot of really good guys, just in general, just working like recreation, parks department, things like that. Just basic city work, fresh out of high school, and started talking to these guys. They were kind of volunteering at the department. They were making a little extra money for doing that. My wife and I were kind of like just doing our thing, just trying to get by, raise kids, do our thing. And they basically talked me into just coming down and just giving it a chance. And maybe I'm assuming they seen something in me at that time, as a young guy. And these guys, like, I reflect back on that time in my life now, 20 plus years later, and I was surrounded by some really great mentors that I didn't even realize at the time that I was being, mentored by, just kind of informally mentored by.
Right.
So they talked me into kind of joining. I tossed it around. My wife, like I said, she's been with me for 24 years now. We've been married, and so she's seen this whole journey from start to where we are now. So she's been definitely the support role behind it for sure. And so I was kind of thinking I need a little extra money. That's kind of what I was initially getting into it for. Um, and then I said, well, talk to her. We kind of bounced it back and forth, and it was kind of like a paid on call deal. Like, so it wasn't like a
Sure.
full-time
Yep.
gig. We're just kind of like paid by shifts and make a couple extra $100 a month. It wasn't a whole lot of money. So I joined, and right away, like from the start, it was just like, I don't know, something connected. So I was kind of big in sports all through high school, all through growing up. So it kind of gave me that connection back that I think I was missing at the time. Just that brotherhood, that fellowship, that just team support on things. And I just kind of started absorbing the job, and really like got really engaged into it, and then realized that if I wanted to progress, I had to kind of move on from the current department that I was at, because they were just kind of, nothing knocking that department. It's a great department. It's a great starting point. It just wasn't the career for me at the time.
Right. Yep.
So at that time, I reached out and started kind of looking at some local departments and kind of found a few that I was interested in. Took a leap of faith and kind of stopped what I was normally doing, which was going to work every day and doing our thing and paying bills. And then got hired on with South Walton Fire District in August of 2005. So since then, just kind of came up through the ranks. Started as a firefighter, worked my way up. Became a paramedic there, became a sergeant, which is our driver, moved into that company officer role, and then into district chief role after that. That's where I'm currently at now. So it's been a journey of 23 plus years, with just feeding that fuel, like that fuel of the job, just absorbing the job, loving the job, and reflecting back over the most recent times, last several years of how that journey started, exactly what we're talking about. And then just, thinking about them early mentors that I had that were so like impactful for me.
And I'll ask, do you think that's what like started your path to sharing and mentoring and writing? I mean, like you had these mentors and now you're looking back saying, how do I kind of pay it forward?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think this job's all about like making the next people better. Next people being the next chief officers, the next company officers, the next firefighter, whatever that looks like.
Yep.
So however you could share that connection, whether that's through fire conferences, writing, podcasts, just internal within your own organization, creating things like I think any way you could share that for sure. Like I do feel like I owe the job a lot, and I want to give that back to the next generation and make them better than we had it for sure.
Excellent. And I think that's a common theme, right? In the fire service, at least among the people that are full of passion for the job, right? Is this desire to kind of give back and to better it and share what we've learned and what we know with others. And I don't want to say that's just unique just to the fire service because I'm certain other industries are similar. But obviously, having spent my entire adult life in the fire service, I kind of only know one business and a little bit of the police side, public safety. But we do a really good job of sharing what we know. I think that's one of the hallmarks of what we do in the fire service, and it's cool because then you're learning stuff that other people's experience, right? So, and that's so valuable. So you talk about coming up through the ranks, and then I want to talk a little bit about the article you wrote a couple years ago about the way a company officer can be an influencer. And I think what's funny is that, the title of the article uses a word that we use in 2025 or 2023, right? Influencer.
Yeah.
And, my work sometimes at the academy, we talk a lot about creating content, and talk about people consuming our content, which again, like 10 years ago, we wouldn't have said it that way. We would have said, does somebody watch our video, right? But today's language and today's learner, the people we're trying to connect with, and I think the people that you're trying to connect with in some of the work that you're doing, using that word influencer, because you could have used any word. I mean, you could have wrote, how does a company officer be a good leader or be a good guide or be a good mentor? Because those 7 things you talk about are important, but they could be called anything. But it's just funny that we use today's word to connect with today's person, right? Isn't that what a good mentor does? A good mentor connects with the person that they're mentoring. So I think right there in the way you choose the article title just kind of sets that up. So what kind of brought that article on? What role where were you? Were you in your role now? Were you a district chief or?
Yeah, I was a district chief, and I was kind of reflecting back as a company officer and the impact within the organization that I'm working in, seeing the good and the bad, influence within the organization based on the company officer and how they drive that. So that kind of drove that article because I really wanted to put that word out there. Like, we talk about it a lot, but like it is truly so impactful, and they're probably the biggest part of an organizational culture. Like they have so much influence day to day. They have so much influence, with their company. It's just so impactful, and I think that people have to really understand the importance when they put that bugle on, or if it's a captain's position and it's 2 bugles or whatever that looks like. Like there's so much influence and so much that goes with that, other than just maybe a little bit of a pay raise and a little bit of authority. So I think it's important for them to understand that they're kind of going into that. I like to look at it as like the offensive coordinator role, because I always reflect back to sports because they're not quite the head coach yet for the battalion or whatever, but now they're offensive coordinator. So it's so important to be like that one that can drive that mission forward and influence some others as they're getting new people on board and they're building their drivers and they're building people up through the organization.
Yeah, it's we one of the departments I worked for a while worked with a consultant, and one of his big things all the time was that the company officer sets the tone of culture. Like that's that small department. The company officer was a shift commander. You had 5 people, and that was kind of the compliment. But the chief was in the house, and so wasn't the deputy and whatnot. So, but he always preached to us that the company officer is going to set the tone. they're going to set the tone for the culture of the department. You know, they isolate the members from the chief, or from the district chief, the battalion, whatever. But they isolate the members from the chief. In theory, they isolate the chief from the members, and they're kind of that intermediary, and that they set the tone, that they drive the culture, that they're the ones with the influence. And I think that's such a strong message. And having read the article and obviously the 7 big takeaways, but like that is so true, and that's how company officers have to see it. How do you? So as a district chief, you got a couple battalion chiefs that work for you, but on a shift of almost 40 people. So how do you today develop your company officers in thinking about their role as an influencer, right? So I guess what advice or what do you give your company officers to really see their role as an influencer?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing is you have to empower them first, right? You have to show them and empower them, and then you have to trust them and let them work. And you have to give them the tools to do that, and obviously the time to do that. But the empowerment is so. Without empowerment, it's never going to work. So, like, if you don't build that trust and build in relationships, with your company officers, and hold them to a standard and hold them accountable, so they can work that down the chain, to their members, and then you start seeing that buy-in. And I've really seen it within our shift over the last several years. Like, we've had such a great cultural shift. We got some really good company officers that are, they're into the job, that they're spreading the right message, and it's been a marathon, over time to kind of get that buy-in and get the right people in the right seats to, to empower them the right way, to trust them the right way, and to know that they're going to do the right thing and lead in the right way.
Yeah, I'm going to guess, and I mean, you and I both are on, of course, the East Coast, but I'm going to guess that all of the people, or the vast majority of the officers that I mean, they want to do the right thing.
Absolutely.
They, every once in a while, and even the ones that kind of mess stuff up, usually if you get a good conversation going with them, they were well intended, and then they mess things up. Very few people are in the fire service and intentionally mess things up, right? At least that's my experience. Is that so I think that you're spot on. Right? If you empower them, they're gonna do the right thing because that's what they want to do. And then as long as the people that supervise them kind of help guide that process along. So do you find that? Now, were you a BC before you became a district chief?
So we had a restructure about 2 years ago. So when I promoted out of the lieutenant role, which is our company officer, we had 2 district chiefs, and we functioned as battalion chiefs.
Got it.
So we had 2 districts, but we were titled district chiefs. We've restructured just to have a little bit more accountability, to give us a little bit more operational awareness of things that were going on, and to be a little bit more in tune with the response and things like that. So we've restructured the last 2 years. We have a district chief and 2 battalions now. So my role's changed a little bit over the last couple of years. So that's become, it's become a little challenging to now I'm empowering the battalions to push the message. So having to kind of take that step back a little bit, empower and trust the battalions now. They kind of hold a different role.
So it's almost like you saw the questions in my mind, because that's where I was going to go. Like, how does that change for you then? Because at one moment you're really driving right down to the company officers. You're working with the lieutenants, and
Yep.
then boom, a restructure happens, and now you've got to convey the way you want things done to 2 people that then interpret what you've said, and then they go forth to their people and try to get it right. How is that to manage?
So I've been very fortunate, and I can tell you. So my overall, one of my number one goals was, because I kind of seen it with running 2 separate battalions, is this battalion's working this way, this battalion's working that way, and we're a little bit on the same page. We're not completely on the same page, so the dynamics were a lot different. So like one of my goals was to create the standards across the shift, the same expectations across the shift to get complete buy-in. So that was like number one, is between myself and the 2 battalions that came on, is like, hey, here's our time to hit reset. Let's build collectively. Let's build the expectations that we want on the shift. Let's push them out. Let's review them. Let's go over them. And then we get the buy-in from the crews and the company officers, so they can provide that feedback, and they can be a part of that process as well. And it's a working document that we're evaluating every year. We're reviewing it. We're updating it as needed. we're taking, we've had guys from firefighter level to company officer level change our expectations based on what's working, what's not working. So I think it's being open to that and understanding that this job is always changing and there may be ways to do things a little bit better, being open-minded to that and really pushing that message. But getting the buy-in, I think, is the biggest thing. And since then, like since we've been able to hold the same expectations across the entire shift, it's been a significant change in how we operate and how we do things.
I can imagine. I mean, one of the key functions of a leader is to set the expectations. And once you do that, again, that defaults back to the fact that most of the people that do what we do want to do it the right way and want to do it the best way. And we set the expectation, then they know what's expected of them. And then they can execute on the expectation, which I think then when you empower them, I mean, it all ties together, right? And then we've got successful missions is really what we're after. I mean, all of it's just funny because I equate all this leadership stuff to like throwing a ground ladder, right? Throwing a ground ladder is not the task. We have to throw the ground ladder, but then we have to go do something. Whether you're throwing the ladder to conduct a search, whether you're bringing a hose up that way, whether you're just, throwing it for the future, right? What could go wrong? We're going to ladder the building, so we've got a secondary means of egress, whatever. But like throwing the ladder is usually not the work. There's the next step. And we have all these leadership conversations, but it's not even the work. Like that just sets the stuff up. We then have to execute the work and then apply all of this leadership stuff to the mission. And that's what makes the mission successful. So it's equally as important, but it's still not the thing. I mean, the thing is the bell going off and the boys and girls responding on a call and executing well. That's the actual thing. So you take a couple years off from writing. I'm sure you were doing a bunch of other things. And then you write another article, or at least another article gets picked up. I'm not saying you weren't writing because I'm sure you're writing, but it gets picked up by Fire Engineering. And it talks about the Suburban Chief Officer mindset and developing that mindset. And, you already started to talk a little bit about open-mindedness, which is important, especially in 2025. I think there was definitely that post-Vietnam crowd that got away with like telling us how it was going to be and people listened, to now people want to know more. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but being open-minded as a leader and being open-minded as a follower makes a lot of sense now. But so this article you wrote really just talks about that ranking up and what the Suburban Chief Officer needs to do. Why don't you tell me a little bit about that article and why you wrote it? How about that? We'll go with why you wrote it.
So the driving force behind it is it really is like true experience that I'm writing. It's what I kind of lived in a sense, and nothing like knocking my organization or any other organization, but it's just I think there's a huge gap in that piece even from myself. So most of us, we can probably say that we get in the business, and I think I talk about this in the article, where like me personally, I never looked past the company officer role. Mm-hmm. Like I knew I wanted to ride the fire truck, I wanted to be a driver. I worked really hard to do all that stuff. I got all the right classes. I attended all the right conferences. I did all the right training, and then I get the company officer. I'm like, all right, good. I'm good. I'm here. Like, this is where I want to be. It's been a journey, and then the opportunity comes to transition over to chief officer, and then you have to answer the question, which a great mentor of mine here locally said, like, if not you, then who? So that's a big question to answer. So then when I transitioned over, like, I was pretty confident what I was doing, but I feel like there was a huge gap and a big learning curve for me as well, and there still is every day. So I think there's just a big gap there, and that's the message I'm trying to push in the article is there is a big gap, and how do we close that gap up a little bit? How do we make that a little bit better for the next generation? And how do we continue that mindset and that passion? And I've seen it way too much where the bugles cross, and all of a sudden, like the expectations, the standards, the lack of, in a sense, is not there anymore. And you're the head coach. So like, what are you doing? Right? You've come from offensive coordinator, head coach, and now what are you doing? And you can speak the big words, but what are you truly doing? Like, are you doing the job the right way? And the right way is leading your people, and leading your people is being present. It's boots on the ground. It's out there with the troops as much as possible. There's always going to be that separation period. We know that, especially in the suburban world. But it's so important to be present in a sense, and create them relationships so they can trust you as well to make them decisions at 2 a.m. when you've got something significant going on. You can't just show up to the game without any practice, and I believe that you truly have to you know close that gap, study the job. When the bugles cross, that means more responsibility, not less. And you always promote more to do more work. And it's just a big gap I've seen in the organizations, just all around, not just in my organization, but all around. And we're doing some really good things in our organization now that is closing that gap up a lot. I'm proud of.
So, Chief, as you're talking, and you probably caught on. I'm looking away. Well, I'm looking at the article. I got the article here,
Perfect.
and you just summarized the article, which tells me a couple of things. Right? It tells me that the article's real. Right? That you didn't sit down at a computer and bang out an article to get it published. Right? That this is real because this is you just spoke through this. I mean, everything you were talking about. I'm like, oh, okay, now we covered that because I highlighted a bunch of stuff because that's how I read.
Yeah,
And as you're going, I'm like, oh, he's right there. He's right there. He's right there. So, and that not that we need to attest to character, but I think that attests to character right there. Like you aren't
absolutely.
someone who sat down at a computer and banged this out and said, I'm going to get it published so that my name will be at the end of the article. That's clearly not the idea here. The idea was that you saw a need to share your story and a need to share just some of the things that you've learned. And it's funny because I highlighted something you pretty much said, um, in talking about company officers. They may feel as though they haven't gained enough experience to move up. Sometimes they just need a little push and some validation from their crew members, department and mentors. And that's so true. And that's the role of senior people, right? Is to do that, is to give that little push, to apply that little bit of pressure. Because there are a lot of people that would make great company officers and great line level leaders that say, nah, it's not for me. And really, what they need is just someone to give them a good old kick and say, "No, it is for you. We need this. The organization needs you to want to do this."
That's
Um,
right.
and I think there's something else. And I'm putting myself out there because some of the stuff that I say is true, and I haven't always believed. And it says here that training is a must and should be the top priority outside of emergency calls. And I feel that way today. I felt that way on and off through my time in the fire service, because I can't lie about that because people would see through that. There was definitely a time where maybe that was the third or fourth priority because there were other things that, maybe became demanding. But I think that's something we have to remember that, if we put emergency calls first and preparing for the emergency calls second and training and preparing for the emergency call second, we will always be at our best. We will always be at our A game. Um, and I could go on, but you already talked about the whole article, so I don't need to go on. But
No, go ahead.
um, but it's true. Like, so what do you think are the biggest? And we didn't talk about this, so like you're just kind of on your own here. I get to ask the questions, and you got to try to come up with answers.
Nice.
What do you think are the biggest challenges that face that person that goes from the right front seat to the buggy or to the car, whatever you call it, where you are? I use the word buggy because a lot of the country seems to call it that.
Yeah,
But maybe it's just a command car, maybe it's the car. I don't know what you call it, but
we'll just go with command vehicle. How about
there we. Okay, that works. That actually works for me.
yeah?
So when you go
I think I
from
called it buggy in the article initially, and then the person that helped me edit it was like, let's change that word." I
well,
was
the
like, "Yeah,
funny
you're
part is around where I am that it's not called the buggy. Like it's
right.
just it would be called the car or whatever, right?
That's right."
But because so many other people call it the buggy, it just like I just started saying that because other people call it that and they like expect you to call it that, so they know what you're talking about, And anyway, so you've gone from the right front seat to the car, the command vehicle. What are the top couple of things that someone needs to learn, like quickly?
So quickly, you have to realize that you go from leaning on your crew for everything to having that relationship in that cab of that engine, that truck, whatever you're riding on that squad. With mapping, with navigating, with listening to things, with making decisions. Like you can always lean on them senior guys, them drivers. Just a company officer doesn't always have the answers, right? So a good company officer is always going to lean on that crew, no matter what the experience is, especially when he has questions, he or she. Um, So now you're by yourself, and you're all by yourself typically, unless you're lucky enough to have a command aide, which we do not have that yet, but maybe one day. So now you're by yourself, and now you're not only are you uh, not only are you by yourself, but now you're entirely of a bigger scale, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you, from a company officer standpoint, their focus typically is their company. Maybe not what's going on throughout the whole battalion, or even which trucks are responding to which alarm. Just what's going on with their company, where they need it, what do they need to do, like that kind of stuff. So that bigger awareness has to change pretty quick, and you got to graduate. Is I think what I would reflect to is you got to get to that next level, and to get in that next level it takes time, and it's a challenge, right? Because you go from again leaning on your crew members to help you navigate through the obstacles that you're going to come through, to where now you show up, you're by yourself, and you can hear the sirens coming, but you're by yourself, and you've got things going on, and you got to make some quick decisions on not only like the decisions, but you got to drive yourself there. You got to listen to the radio. You got to watch out for traffic. You got to make sure the box alarm's correct. You got to correct it when it's not correct. So there's so many things going on in that initial response to get the scene set up the right way. So that was a big challenge. The other challenge, which is always a challenge, is time management and how you prioritize your days, because it's pretty easy to start getting disengaged from what's actually truly going on if you're not intentional about things. And what I mean by that is being present, being around the troops as much as possible, maybe breaking some bread with them whenever the time allows, being in the stations, getting on the training ground, maybe sweating through a workout with them, just popping in, popping out, but also understanding the other piece is the company officers are running the crews. That's part of that empowerment. So especially when you're sharing a house with that company officer, that's the company officer's house, that's the company officer's table. You're kind of a guest in that house, so you have to make sure that you understand that even though you may be the higher rank in the house, that's still there. That's you empower them the right way because that's still their station, that's their company, and you're there as a guest at that point. So there's some challenges there, and then staying into the job and not getting sucked into the administrative task, which is there and it's important and it has to get done, but it can't be your sole purpose. Like you have to find time to keep that passion ignited, for the job, studying the job, still going to fire conferences, networking, whether it's through podcast or articles, studying the job all the time, because yeah, 90% may be administratively driven, but the 10% is the most important. And that's when we show up to emergency scenes, and we got to how we navigate through that.
You you said a lot. Like I had to start writing things down because
Yeah.
you were
I
saying
could I could go on and on. I'm trying to keep it short here. So
no, and it's great. It's great for me, and it's great for the folks that they're going to tune in to hear the important things that you've got to share. And first, um, you said you don't have an aide, right? Like you don't have a driver, you don't have an aide. And
sure.
it's funny because I had a conversation with someone a couple weeks ago who's not really familiar with what we do, but a little bit.
Mhm.
And I made a comment about how they live in a moderate size, a small city, but a city. And I said that their shift commanding chiefs don't have aides, and they were like, "Well, why do they need that?" And we got into this conversation about all the things that go on the way to a call, and I had that, and now you know, I had the luxury, right, of having the company with me, having so everybody's in the engine, and you can talk about what you're doing, right? You're multiple people are hearing the radio, multiple people are kind of chiming in a little bit. You got some maybe senior people with you, like they're chiming in on some of their experience. You got some of the younger folks that are chiming in on a newer thing they heard about. So whatever it is, whether you're going to a call or you're returning from a call and you're talking about the call, you've got a diverse group of people. And like you said, now you don't have that anymore. Like
That's right.
now you're there and you're doing it all yourself, right? You're trying to bring stuff up maybe on the mobile data terminal. You're trying to listen to radio traffic, especially if you're not arriving first. So you're trying to listen to radio traffic. You're trying to think about the box assignment and is everything right? Because at the end of the day, if it's not right, the chief's going to come to you and say, why is it not right? So you're trying
Right.
to get everything right. I think, I could probably help anybody build a case for AIDS, and they wouldn't need help because the story writes themselves, but they're an expense. And,
Yeah.
they're an expense, and they sound like an administrative expense. And we know that they're not. They're operational.
Right.
A really good aide does a lot on scene. We've got some chiefs around here that have them, and we know what they do, and they do a lot of things. But so then there was something else that that you said, and I want to elaborate a little on it because I think that there's a lot of departments that are growing right now, whether they're, kind of getting in the EMS game or, the scales of tip, the service demand is there and they're growing. And now they're starting to put the shift commander in the car. So, maybe for years the shift commander's been an apparatus. And I'm talking about those departments that are maybe 12 people a shift, where the shift commanders, maybe a captain, they're still in the engine. They pick and choose the runs their engine goes to outside of district, but now they're moving to the car, and I think that there's some disengagement that occurs, and you seem to hit the nail on the head when you were talking about time management and about kind of making sure you stay dialed in. Can you kind of walk us through what your day looks like, and how you manage that process? So you work 24s?
You work 48.96 right now, so we're 2 on 4 off.
Oh, 48.96. That's nice. There's
the 96 is nice.
The 90 and the 48's nice too, right? Because you can go in maybe and you check the piece once and then you work for 2 days. There's some other stuff too that I think, as an outside perspective, probably is really nice.
There's pros and cons too, for sure.
Fair. Can you walk me through some of the highlights of the shift that help you stay engaged and not become complacent, where you got your own car, you can do your own thing, or not do your own thing? Like, right, that's the risk. The risk isn't that you're going to do too much. The risk is that maybe you're going to do too little. And how do you combat all that? You've been in position a couple of years. How do you combat all that?
So I think you have to have intentions for one. You have to be very intentional about your planning, about what are your priorities. And if you don't have them priorities identified, then I think you can get sucked into, well, where we eating lunch at, and where we going here, and I'm gonna get my admin work done, or whatever that looks like throughout the day. So I think you have to be very intentional about your planning. And at this level, we're planning a month out at least, and with some backup days in between, and what that looks like. So what that looks like for me is, okay, what's going on throughout the district that, these are things that are going on that we've got to coordinate through. What are our shift plans? And what are we trying to focus on this month? Do we have company officer meetings? Do we have, facilitated training that we're going to run? Are we going to do some search drills? Are we going to do some command training? What does that look like? And being intentional about having that plan A and plan B to fall back on. Because as you know, being in this job, plans are great, but plans don't always happen because things come up that do derail them. But as long as we're intentional about getting back on the tracks, I think that's the big thing, and not just looking for that reason to get off the tracks. And I've seen that too much in the game too, where like, oh, we can't go do training because we had a call or we had something, and you've seen all that happen in the past where, you have to make it a priority and you have to be there. So for me, it's just about being intentional and also giving space, attending training, and sometimes conducting training. There's a difference between the two. So is there things that we need to work on as a shift that we want to drive and get the buy-in from the crew, so we're all speaking the same lingo and we're all on the same page when it comes down to tactics, and we're doing the things that we want to do. And then getting the buy-in, and little things that's just doing mask up drills. That is so much influence on that. And I'll run you through that real quick. So like a year ago, we started last summer. It was kind of that July in the Florida Panhandle. It's hot, so we need to get some training done. We've been talking about some things. We had a really good class that was presented to us. It was about mask up times and all this other stuff. So hey, let's look at our mask up times and see where we're at, because we hadn't really identified that at that time. So we spent the month of July just doing mask up times, and each member had to get so many mask up times. We wanted to find an average time. We want to come back. We want to kind of talk about that as the shift level, and then let the company officers help identify what that looks like and what's going to be our standard moving forward. So we were able to do that with the influence based on the company, and we identified that. So then what it went from 30 to 35, 40-second mask up times has turned into 8, 9, 10 seconds with gloves on, which is amazing, right? So that's absolutely amazing. So we did that, and that was great. And now we got everybody, and this is from the district chief to the battalion chiefs to the company. Everybody's doing it. So and that was the whole shift of it. So we captured that. Now it's like, okay, now we've captured. Now how do we maintain it? Again, put it back on the companies. Like, how do you guys want to maintain this? Because this is important. We've done it, but if we don't practice, we're going to lose it.
Yeah, perishable skill.
Absolutely. So we all agreed with the buy-in from the companies. Yeah, they agree we need to maintain this because they worked hard to get that standard and they want to maintain that standard. So we do a little drill. It's called Mask Up Monday. We just did it yesterday. We go out there and we've got a set time. I think it's the expectation is everybody is able to mask up. So we took the top number, the bottom number, and what's our best number. So you can mask up with gloves on within less than 25 seconds is our goal. That's our standard that we've adopted on our shift. Majority of people are hitting 10, 11, 12 seconds with gloves on, which is outstanding. We got some guys that are hitting 5, 6 seconds. They're flying through. It's amazing. But we maintain that every Monday we work. That's part of our drill. So that's a standard that from the district chief to the battalion chief, we're out there throwing our mask on with them in the engine bay. Now that's how we roll things. And but being intentional about that and making sure that we put that on our daily staffing, it's there every Monday. We know we're doing it. And that just goes to any other training that we're doing is just being intentional about it. When we show up as chiefs for training, we show up to train. We don't show up to let's just go socialize with everybody and shake hands and kind of walk around and show our presence. To me, if you're going to show up to fires, then you got to show up to training. Like if you're putting that air pack on to go to fires, to be in that forward working position or whatever that looks like, show up to training, understand what's going on, support your people, like empower them. And it's just intentions is really the best word that I can describe.
Yeah, I mean, there's a saying about that, like if you don't plan your day, somebody else will, right? Like, and if you don't, if you don't live with intention and you don't work with intention, somebody else's intentions are going to creep into your day, and then you're going to get their stuff done and not your stuff, or get what's important to them,
Right.
and not what's important necessarily to you and to your people. So, because I do know there are some departments out there that that I have friends on that are growing right now, and they do talk about that. They talk about the officer went from the engine, the officer maybe now is in the car, and some people struggle with that move, and
Yes.
and I think if you don't find some mentors that have walked that road, and not even someone who works in that role, but somebody who didn't work in that role and then started to. Because if someone's been in that role for 10 years, they may not remember what it was like to flip the switch. They may not remember all the nuances they had to learn in those beginning years, to go from the right front seat to the car. But if you find someone who did it recently, they're going to have maybe some different views. Because it's with anything. If we talk to somebody who was really good at something a decade ago, the reality is they're going to forget all the subtle nuances they had to learn to become really good at it. They're going to talk about what makes them good at it today, but they may not remember, especially all the little pain points along that initial learning curve. Where if you can get someone who's, again, newer at it, they may remember some of those pain point stills and give you some pieces of advice that you aren't going to get. But now you also got to listen to people who have got a decade of experience doing something because they've got reps.
There's a balance there, right?
Right. It's like everything. There should be a balance, right?
Yeah. Let me add to that real quick, Dean.
Yeah.
So like there's any day that I go to work, I could stay in that office all day long and probably still never get caught up. That's reality. But what's important, right? So that office stuff will be there. I'll get that done in time. But what is truly important is being present, being engaged, but finding the balance. Like we talked about earlier, there's a balance between the two. But keeping that main thing, the main thing, right? Like that is true. Like that's reality. That's what truly matters at 2:00 in the morning. Not if I've gotten this SOG updated. That'll be there when I get to it. But we have to be operationally ready first, and that's got to be our number one priority.
How do you not be a micromanager? Because clearly you're not, right? You've talked all the right things, right? But how do you fight that urge, especially having been a company officer and then promoting up? How do you fight that urge to tell the lieutenants, Do it this way. Just do it this way. This is how I want you to do it, whatever that it is.
That's easy. That's easy because I don't have time to do all that. You know what I mean? So, I mean, that's true. Like if I'm micromanaging you, then I'm not doing my job. And if I'm having to micromanage you, there's probably a reason. Maybe it's a behavioral issue, or maybe there's something going on with that. But um, I picked that up as a company officer early on, even as a driver, because like when I became a driver, it was like company officer I was working for at the time, like he wanted me to make them decisions of where I'm going to put that apparatus, where I'm going to get my water supply. He didn't micromanage any of that. So I took that in when I became a company officer, because you've heard it. You've heard it. You're going down the road. Hey, park here, do this, pull that hose, do this. And like, as a company officer, if I'm pulling up to a good working fire, I've got a million things I need to get done. It feels like
Mm-hmm.
I got to get on the radio. I got to get, I got to set the stage. We got to get things rolling. I don't need to tell the firefighter where to stretch or how to stretch. I should be doing that on the training ground. Like we should be talking, having them talks on the training ground, spending the time, getting the sets and reps in. And it just kind of truly just moves up as you go up. Like you have to, again, back to empowering your people, spending time with them, of talking about tactics, talking about, how we want to position trucks, and why, explain the why behind we're doing things, but letting them make them decisions in real time, because that's truly what's going to happen anyway. And if I get down in the weeds of micromanaging every little detail, then as a command, level presence, I'm not going to have that. And I'm going to be too worried about what's going on with the stretch, opposed to, hey, you guys are on fire attack. That's all I need to know is you got fire attack. So I think it's just, I don't have time for it, honestly. We just got to do that on the training ground.
There you go. How many companies do you have?
So we got 6 companies total. We have 5 stations. We got our 6th station is in the works for the next couple of years, but we've double housed one station. So we've added that additional company. Um, and then we run our rescues, our ambulances. So we do transport as well. So we have an ambulance at each station.
Are they cross-staffed off the engine, or is it a separate?
No, they're fully staffed. They're separate. So they run the fires with us, and they do search and all the other stuff that goes along with that. So 6 companies total as far as suppression.
So do you have the benefit of being able to take a company out of service from time to train, or 2 companies out of service, or I say out of service, mildly out of service?
Yeah, absolutely. So we got a pretty nice training facility, and we're able to kind of rotate. So we have a rotation for the crews that come down based on the day. Everybody's got their own day, like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever your day falls on. So that's more of the company level training. And then if we're doing like some stuff that we're working on the shift level, I think next month we're working on like firefighter survival. We're going to rotate one company down at a time, and they'll be on a very delayed response.
Mm-hmm.
This time of year, it slows down a little bit for us. So we're able to kind of get back into that grind of, kind of scaling back a little bit as far as our response, and being able to kind of, be a little bit delayed responding because we got more coverage.
Sure. So let me ask you about that. How busy? You say it's quieter down there right now. How busy are you? Like on a 24? 6 companies will do.
I mean, we're not slammed. We're probably like right now. It's not busy at all. We're probably like running maybe 30, 40 calls, a day. It's not slammed, but we can get up to 60, 70, 80 in peak season. But it's a lot of transports. It's a lot of med calls. It's we do run our fires, of course, but a lot of beach calls. We're right on the coast, so we have a lot of water rescues, things like that going on. So pretty much all hazards, anything you can think of. But it does. It seems like it goes in stages and phases. It just falls apart at once. We're we like 10 calls pop off and everybody's
Sure.
out running calls, and then we slow back down.
Tourists, a lot of tourists, a lot of.
Yes, so we have about population's probably 35, 40,000 just year round.
Yep.
But then we have over like 2 million visitors a year. So we'll go from 30,000 to 150,000 overnight.
So it really is, in this season, it's critical for you to start doing some of that training.
Absolutely.
So that because you can't always get to it in the summer or in your peak season.
Yeah. We still maintain training throughout, but it does scale a little bit. June, July, August is pretty tough, just because it's very busy during their months.
And it's also very hot. I just, I
Absolutely.
Like I am from the north. Like, let's just be clear. It's hot.
It's very hot.
It's very hot. So we talked a little bit about some transitional stuff, about both the articles you've written that I've read, and what are just some, I guess, some closing pieces of advice you'd give to someone who is either a senior firefighter looking to become an officer, a company officer, or a senior company officer looking to rank up. If there were 3 or 4 things that they should be really thinking about doing, what are those 3 or 4 things that they should be thinking about doing to take that next step?
So for the firefighter looking to move up even into driver and driver up to company
Sure.
officer, that kind of,
Yeah.
so number one, be a student of the job, like a true student of the job, like know your position inside and out. If you're riding backwards, you're riding the nozzles, the irons, whatever that is. Like, be really good at that. Create that attention to detail to where you can see when things are out of place. You have that mindset and that attention to detail, because it's very important to have that as you move up through the ranks, because that detail becomes bigger, and it impacts a lot more than maybe if the irons weren't quite clean, or maybe they were out of place. That impacts more as you move up. So, student of the job, ignite your passion, go to fire conferences, be really, if you want to be a good driver, be a great fireman. If you want to be a great driver, or if you want to be a great or a good company officer, be a great driver, and then so on. So, like, be really good where you're at first, and have some seat time, right? You need some credibility. We all need that. So there's a lot of movement going on in a lot of different organizations. There's a lot of retirements going on, and that's all good. And things are happening, faster than expected. So prepare now for later, because things are never going to happen on your own time. It's never going to be, I'm going to sit in this seat for 8 years and I'm going to go to this seat for 8 years. It just kind of happens overnight, and you never really seen it coming most of the time. That's kind of been my career path. But don't waste time, and be a student of that job, learn the job, and stay engaged, and never forget why you're there. And you're there for the mission first, the people, the citizens that we serve. And never forget the first day on the job when you got hired, how that felt, and that first fire you made, how that felt. So if you keep that passion, that's going to keep you motivated. That's going to keep you become a student of the job. And I think that's extremely important to do that, all the way up through the ranks, and not just to get to a certain point and maybe not hit the state classes to get the preference points on the exam or whatever that looks like. But are you truly studying the job? Are you reading articles? Are you listening to podcasts? Are you reading books? Are you going to fire conferences? Like, whatever that looks like, there's so much opportunity now to learn the job from a lot of, like, great instructors, a lot of experience out there that we didn't have 10, 15 years ago. So absorb that now while it's here. And then the company officers need to make sure the new firemen coming in understand that, and kind of create that pathway and create that influence throughout.
So what's next for you? So, like, and not maybe at the job, but like, what's next for you? You've written 2 articles: firehouse, fire engineering. You got another article you're working on, a thought process, or you're presenting anywhere. Where can we think to see you next or hear from you next?
Yeah, so I am. I've got a thought process and an article that I'm kind of laying out now, and it's
Cool.
really about. It's going to be over, like, probably incident command, and it's going to be different steps based on that. Hopefully, it's going to be a series if it comes out the way I want it to be. So that'll be in the works in the next couple months, and then hopefully have that kind of tuned up a little bit to be submitted into firehouse or fire engineering or wherever that goes.
Hmm.
Um, I'm currently serving on a FSRI committee. I just got back from Philadelphia last week. So that's pretty exciting. We should be up in Philadelphia like next springtime, hopefully, to do some testing and things like that through UL. So
Cool.
that's going to be exciting. Teaching locally here in the Panhandle, we've got what we call 850 Training Day. That's coming up November 21st. So we just actually got the date the other day about that. So I'll be teaching there. And then, not sure, really, don't really have anything else on the schedule or on the books yet, but definitely open, if anybody needs anything, or if I can help them in any way. Um, I'm not sure where I'll be at.
And I think that what you said really sums up. At least, I mean, listen, this is probably going to turn to episode 10, is what I'm going to guess.
Nice.
And the 8 or 9 guests that I've had before, all kind of say the same thing, right? If anybody needs anything, like, I'm here to help. And isn't it funny that, the vast majority of people get in the fire service because they're helpers, right? And that's one of the challenges we have is that, you know, in my role at work, there's sometimes opportunities that we do a lot of admin. I mean, I work at the academy. We do a lot of admin work. And one of my peers who's not a fire service professional always says, one of the problems with you firefighters is you won't let anybody fail at anything. Like, you constantly help. You, like, help everybody do everything. Like,
Yeah.
if somebody gets assigned a task and they're struggling, like, you never let them fail. And I kind of chuckle every time they say it to me because it's true, right? Like, most of us got in the fire service to help other people, and that's just who we are. And I think you summed it up, when you said, "Hey, if there's anybody I can help in any way, as long as they reach out, I'll do what I can." And that's like, I guess that's the training side of 911 is that, when the public needs us, they call 911 and they call and we go and we mitigate whatever. But just saying, hey, if anybody needs anything, reach out. That's the way we do it in training. If you need something and you think I might have an answer, or I can connect you with somebody that has an answer, just reach out. So I guess we're kind of at a point here where we've talked about a lot of things. We've talked about all the things that I wanted to cover. Is there anything that you think we haven't talked about without opening up the next hour? How about that? Is there anything that Chief Kidder wants to get out there that we haven't covered yet?
That's a good question. We can go on for a couple more hours. It's just, make things the priority. That's the thing. Like the bugles cross, whatever that looks like, that transition. Just don't forget that. Like it's so important that you stay engaged and you stay relevant to the job, and then you empower your people, like we've talked about, because the bugles cross. That's not a free pass. That's a pass to be better. That's a pass to get better. That's a pass to graduate to the next level, to get ready for that fire you haven't had yet. And that's kind of what I'm going to be, hopefully, my article that again, it's just kind of an idea right now. I've been kind of tossing some ideas around, but it's about the first like 5 minutes of, on scene incident command. And I'm hoping to take that into like a series is kind of my plan. So it's kind of something I was prompted by one of my mentors. And I was like, yeah, I could probably do something with that. And then I kind of started jotting some ideas down. So I think just study the job. Don't study where you're going to lunch when the bugles cross. Food's important. We all know that. But what's truly important is being engaged to the job and loving the job, man.
Chief, I've had a great time talking with you,
Absolutely.
and I truly thank you for coming on. And I
Yes,
guess
sir.
this is kind of where we wrap it up. So, I thank everybody that tuned in, that watched this or listened to this episode. Thank you for tuning in to Talkin' Fire. Our guest today has been District Chief Chris Kidder from the South Walton Fire District. Our executive producer is Mac Rice. My name's Dean Babineau, and we'll see you next time when we'll be talking fire.